Hi, I'm Romi.
And I'm Nicole.
We are two businesswomen, two colleagues, two friends who had an idea and decided to do something with it. Over the past 2 years, we've built the Daily Drip, a media platform and community for the modern South Florida businesswoman.
From Palm Beach to South Beach, we've built an audience of thousands of local business owners, CEOs, founders, executives, and more. And we did it 100% organically.
Whether it's through our blog, weekly newsletter, social media, events, or even this podcast, our mission is to offer a daily drop of inspiration as you pursue your dreams.
People ask us all the time how we did it and why we did it. Join us as we bring you along our journey and the journeys of so many other incredible local businesswomen here on Her Pursuit. Hi, welcome to the Her Pursuit podcast. My name's Nicole Mastrangelo, founder of the Daily Drip, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Ms. Romi Wallach. Say hi. Hi. Can you tell it's amateur hour today? We are here joined by two of our wonderful thought leaders. I have with us Ms. Nicole Cumberbatch, founder of the Motherhood Village, and I'm also here with Ms. Dahlia Attia-King, founder of Panacea. So thank you guys for being here. I'm really excited we're going to have this conversation today. And what I really wanted to talk about on the podcast and give some time to was problem solving, right? So like Romi and I talk all the time, right, Rome? Like We're always talking about how the Daily Drip wasn't an idea in and of itself. It's not something we started out to do. It wasn't like, oh, we wanted to start this media platform. Let's go out and do it. We actually just were struggling ourselves. We had this problem that we were trying to solve for ourselves.
Yeah, so we were both in a situation where we were launching our own businesses and careers, looking to help each other and recognizing that there were a lack of resources, there was a lack of support, there was a lack of just framework to do what we were doing, and in helping one another and then trying to share that, it kind of evolved into this. And I think that's what we all share in common is we identified something that we were plagued with, something that we were looking for. And then as we started to work through that, it was like, I got to pay this forward. Like I gotta figure out how to get this out there so other people, because there's for sure other people dealing with this, and you created a village. We created a community, and it all came from something that we needed and something that we then wanted to share with other people. And I'm really interested in hearing Dahlia's story about how were you affected by something in genetics, or how you got on this journey? Because I know how Nicole started as a mom looking for resources in us, but I'm not really sure I know exactly your story.
Yeah, so I was just telling you guys before we even started recording this that, if you asked me like what I'd be doing, 10 years ago, it 100% would not have been founding, a genetics company. So I was actually on my way to medical school. I really wanted to be a doctor like my dad and my grandfather. I come from a long line of doctors. And as I was applying, I came across this very obscure and somewhat shady opportunity to work for a group of up-and-coming genetic laboratories. And I thought I'd take it because I needed to kill some time. And genetics was a huge part of my education, as you can imagine, a pre-med student, right? So I took the opportunity, and the job was what I thought to be a very simple job, which was to sell genetic testing to doctors, right? It's a no-brainer. Of course, genetic testing saves lives. It helps, identify risks for people so that they can sort of get ahead of these risks and potentially save their own lives. Well, in a very short period of time, I realized that medicine was really not ready for genetics and genetic testing. And the bottom line was there were two major problems. Doctors are not that aware on how to utilize genetic testing in the care of their patients. And it's simply because genetics is kind of new in the space. Secondly, insurance companies don't do a great job of covering genetic testing for people. So there's this incredible technology that exists, and yet doctors aren't prescribing it, and insurance companies aren't covering it, and people aren't getting it. So when I observed that problem, I was blown away. I never thought in a million years that these two things in healthcare would be they'd exist, that they'd be a problem. So I thought to myself, am I going to go to med school knowing that this is a huge problem? Like, I can't unsee it, like you said, Romi, right? You observe this problem and you're like, this is a big thing. how can I just move past it, right? Genetics is the future of medicine. Precision medicine, personalized care, all
Proactive care, which is huge right now post-COVID.
Totally. So how am I going to just ignore the fact that the one thing that all those things center around is inaccessible? Nobody's getting it.
But yet it's one of the biggest things to save lives.
Yeah.
And the doctors and the health insurance
They're just like, they
can't
kind of all shrug their shoulders. They're like, yeah, well, it's, doctors are like, we don't really know how to use it. It's too new.
And it's sort of only utilized, I feel like, I think the only really exposure I've had to it is prenatally, right? Like before you get
That's such a
pregnant,
good point.
especially as Jewish, right? Like you got to make
Yes.
sure you're not carrying Canavan, Tay-Sachs, certain things like that.
Exactly. So the two biggest uses, like you said, are when you're pregnant, right? Prenatal. And when you're already sick, you have cancer. Those are the two biggest uses, of genetic testing. And there's this whole world of prevention, like you were saying, Nicole, that is so powerful, and genetic testing can be used for it, but it's never used for it. So I was like, I can't look away. I have to put a pin in med school. And I have to try to fix this problem. And in hindsight, I don't know if I would have done it. It is so hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But that's kind of what made me choose this path, because this problem presented itself. And I just couldn't live with myself knowing that it existed.
And that's so you, Nicole, and that was so us, where you ended up needing resources and looking for things. You tell a little bit of your story and how it unfolded in you creating your solution.
Sure. And gosh, the podcaster in me, I'm like, or I was ready to go in, but I was like, this is about to change into a whole different conversation. But yeah, very similar. And actually, I think it's serendipitous how things happen in our lives. And I just want to say this one point, because I'm sure you can attest to it too. It's hard because no one else would do it. So you were meant to almost do it. It fell on you to have this enlightenment. Like the doctor said, yeah, it's kind of hard. No one knows the space. Who's going to really dedicate the time to do it? Which I think is so important, because that's a part of, I think, a skill to be an entrepreneur. Like you have the grit to kind of do it, and you have to push yourself.
Stamina.
It is.
Oh, yes.
It is not for the faint of
stamina
heart.
Is not.
Isn't it so interesting that really the problem you stumbled upon was just creating the ability for access to this stuff? It's not like you developed genetic testing. And that's kind of what you did, Nicole, was creating access to parenting resources. So talk about that.
Very, very high level, because I feel like I have changed. I have how do I really describe it? And it's true. After having my son, I realized, okay, I'm educated. My husband and I hit I was making six figures at the time when my son was born. My husband and I hit, we dated beforehand. I'm like, oh, we're going to kill this parenting game. Like we have the money, we have the relationship, we have the village. And then my son came and I was freaking rocked. And I'm like, if I'm rocked and I've hit all the parameters, how can a single mom do this? How can the underserved communities do this? And I'm like, holy hell. And I know that there are programs to help parents, but I'm like, and families and children, but it really goes back to mom, because if mom is not good, F everything else. It has to go to a mother's mental health. That's how she can then be able to, if she could regulate herself, if she could really tap into who she is, she can help her child. So instinctively, I knew that. So started from a podcast 4 years ago. I said, okay, I need to have conversations about how hard this is. So similar to what you said, if someone can be inspired by my story and be a little more informed, they won't be so shell-shocked as I was. Very quickly realized during those conversations, I'm like, this needs to go further than a 60-minute conversation. I need to then either collaborate with these peoples or bring out this message further, so that a mother knows how important it is for estate planning. So a mother knows how important it is, again, to get therapy to heal her own trauma, so then she doesn't pass it to her child. Because that's very real, to pass trauma from utero to your child, like real stuff like that, So my problem was, how do I then get it to the masses? I'm having these important, very important conversations. So how do I get it to the masses? And then hence the Motherhood Village was born through trial and error. Do I do it through a workshop? Do I do it through this? And now I have the summit to really try and encompass that. Because more importantly, I feel like, and I'll end with this, is we invest a lot when we're in our corporate career and our education. We get the degrees, we get all that stuff. But once we become a parent, or even as a man or a woman, because even fathers, we don't really invest in our own personal growth to then help said child. We want to help them communicate, but we don't damn have the communication strategies. We kind of do when we get into leadership positions, but how many people have that? So really the summit and what I'm trying to grow with the Motherhood Village is to bring forth those really critical skills that moms can ingest themselves to then be able to raise the next generation to be much better than the tools we were given. That's kind of, yeah.
It's important to just point this out, and I'll even pat ourselves on the back a little bit, which I do shy away from most of the time, is that it is so hard. And there are days where you are like, I don't even know how I can do this for another day. But then at the same point, look at us all and where we're at. And it's like the drive and the fire because of the belief so strong in what you're doing. Like when you say how hard it is, like even when you have your moments of doubt, you know that you have something that has to get out there. And so you push through that. And I think that that's really important because that's why this is not for the faint of heart. The self-doubt is real. The difficulty is real. The getting it all out there is real. But like,
Well, I think it's very real because all of these solutions were born out of our own need, right? So the self-doubt comes from the fact that I'm looking for professional resources. Who am I to go and say I have a destination for professional resources to help empower you? Right. Like, we very much are a user of our own product. And we're very much developing it, evolving it, and refining it. I said earlier in our thought leadership meeting, the job is never done because the problem evolves and we evolve. And so the product always evolves constantly. And Romi and I are very much users of what we've got here, right? Like when the Daily Drip started to evolve, I knew I didn't need another networking group. Romi knew she didn't need another networking group. What we needed was a way to bridge the gap and show up digitally. We knew we had to show up digitally, especially during COVID. Everybody was trying to figure that out out of desperation. It was like, how do I stay relevant? How do I continue to show up? How do I do it effectively? And so I knew that we needed to create like this communal platform where everybody gets an opportunity to show up. Right? It's like something where everyone can learn how to amplify their voice and a stage for all those voices, a place to go and access them. Because these voices are resources, right? A lot of the thought leaders who come into our program, they're experts, they're seasoned attorneys, financial advisors, tax strategists, marketers. I'm not the only marketer in the group, and I think that would be very surprising to a lot of people to know that I'm not the only marketer that's here. And those are some of my favorite conversations to have, but it's like the stamina and the perseverance comes from being a user and needing this as much as everyone else does.
We sip our own Kool-Aid. And I say that in a very real way that I have been a student of Nicole's, of understanding the importance of this digital presence, of sharing and getting on social media. When we met, I had like no visibility, and I've worked my way through it because of this community and because of what I'm learning, not just from you, but from the other thought leaders. And so we're living and breathing the proof of what we're doing. Like we're doing it alongside.
And I think it's so important, and I'm sure it relates to you of what you've learned. And I'd love to hear that of like how genetic testing helped you. Yeah. But I want to say this one point to end too, because I'm a parent. I'm knee deep into it. My child just started kindergarten. I'm like, WTF. Like I'm about to start a support group for parents with children in elementary school, because there's so many more outside factors than what we even had to deal with, and with social media and certain things, and to really learning how to be an advocate for your child, especially if your child is a child of color. Like it just is what it is. So, I'm trying to get as many tools as I can to help raise this little boy to be, a gentleman and a be successful. So I'm using it too. So I'm like, I'm helping it. So like these experts that I talk to are helping me raise this child so that I can then help other parents with their children. But I'd love to hear how the genetic testing helped you with your sister.
This is so funny because you guys all had a problem that presented itself to you personally, right? That, of course, inspired you to solve it, which is so amazing. I didn't have that problem. I didn't have an access to genetic testing problem. I observed it. It was something that I saw was impacting a lot of people, and I thought that inspired me to kind of try to fix it. But the irony is that when I did fix it, ultimately I created my company and I made these tests more affordable and accessible. I was patient number 1 of my company and my sister was patient number 2. Obviously, I'm a founder of a genetics company. Like, who would I be if I didn't get the genetic test myself, right?
Right.
So, of course, I got the test not suspecting that I would even have any scary results because there's no cancer, really in my family. Everybody's relatively healthy, knock on wood. Couple examples, but nothing major. And every single doctor that my sister and I spoke to said, you don't need it. You don't need genetic testing. There's no signal for you to actually be a good candidate for it, right? So when we got the test ourselves, ironically, we both have a gene that makes us 9 times more likely to develop ovarian cancer than the average woman. And we would have never known that.
That's wild.
Never
That's a
known.
wild statistic.
It is wild.
And scary, because how many of us are walking around, the doctor's like, yeah, you're healthy, and you're like,
Actually, about probably 50%. Statistics and research is showing that half of the people who end up getting cancer actually have genetic mutations that could have prevented that particular cancer. 50%, not 5%, 10%.
That's incredible.
Half of the people who have
So
cancer.
then it's like, how can you know that and sleep at night and not do anything about it? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And hence why you're doing this. And so I want to just ask one more question because
I'm sorry, let me correct myself. Not half the people. I got the statistic wrong. So between 10 and 25% of people, that have cancer have genetic links to that cancer. But
Right.
what I wanted to kind of clarify is half of those people would have been missed by health.
Got it. Right.
Because they don't fit the standard guidelines, like me and my sister.
Right.
So
Right.
half the people are missed.
Yeah.
That's still huge.
It's still massive, yeah.
But I want to just touch on this in the conversation and kind of ask you guys these questions because it was funny when we started out. Like, if somebody could have seen Romi and I's conversations and notes from 2 years ago of what we thought the Daily Drip would be,
What you thought it would be.
we're like 180 degrees away from that. And that really was born out of following the feedback and the requests and really taking our time to observe what is this and what do people need. And I remember we really were like, we would have bet every dollar we had that people were going to come to us and want to be a part of this for the visibility. They were going to want to have their work on our site and their faces in our social feeds and have access to this community that we're growing. And what I learned in 2 years is that people come more for the community than the visibility. Yeah. And that really surprised us, and it completely changed the trajectory of how we've evolved our product.
Sure.
It's become this membership community. The Thought Leadership Program has become this community of amateurs, right? We're not content creators. We're moms. We're marketers. We're genetic testing professionals and founders of startup companies. And it's like it's the community that creates this safe space to dabble into content development, learn about thought leadership and how to put yourself out there. So my question is, Nicole, for you, think of yourself day one, Motherhood Village, to today. What's the biggest lesson you've learned along the way that's kind of shifted your product?
I guess immediately, because when you were talking about that, and I think I've said this before, my husband had to really put it in perspective for me, because I think when I first started, I was like, oh, I have to go global. So the podcast. So I wanted to become like this mom influencer and doing all the things that I saw. Like I remember I was sharing stuff and I would get like a few views. I'm like, what am I doing? Because I'm sharing, because I thought that's what I'm like, I'm a mom influencer. So I need to share that stuff. Very quickly realized no. And my husband came to me, he was like, why are you stressing out trying to reach and go viral when you have like 100,000 moms in like the Coral Springs, Coconut Creek, Pompano Beach area? He's like, you need to scale back. And I was like, damn, like, okay, yes, you're right. He's like, stop. Like, I get it. He's like, and maybe the virality will come with it. He's like, but scale it back. And I think for me, that was the biggest shift, because I was getting stressed out, because I started influencing with it before becoming the influencer, because I thought that's what I had to do. So once he put it in perspective and I'm like, oh yeah, what am I doing? Like there's moms in my area I can reach. That changed everything. So now I say I have this I have a mighty community, because I have the moms that show up in Coconut Creek, Pompano Beach, all these areas. And now, coincidentally, then going viral within its own time frame. Now I can share things and people will like, because now it's happening organically. So that was probably the biggest shift for me, was remove the global and getting stressed, because it was just me. I didn't have a team. And let's bring it and help the moms that I can help locally. And I think that's a big thing that people think they want to like run out the gate and become this influencer. And it's like,
And like me, the marketer in me knew that and knew like the power of micro influencers and local niches. And so we knew out the gate that we wanted to create a local homegrown community because we knew we'd be able to monetize it faster. We'd have more value by being able to penetrate a niche local target market with the types of sponsors and corporate partners we wanted to work with. So, that is, I think you're right, a common misconception is thinking you've got to go big. Like anyone could be a follower. Anyone could be a community leader. Yeah, going deep versus going wide. Yeah, you're right. And so like for you, Dahlia, what do you think you've had quite the journey, right? And like, I don't think anyone really quite understands our healthcare system or can articulate it, right?
Especially if you grew up in Canada.
Oh my God.
Oh God, I've been lost since I got here.
But it's like you've realized that really the product you're selling is not necessarily the test, but the access to it.
Right.
So like, what did you unpack in that? Like the access part of it.
Oh man, no. What's insane is that the beliefs that I had when we first had this idea to solve this problem are 180 degrees different than the beliefs we have now. And it's simply because we really didn't fully understand the problem. You think you understand the problem.
So true.
Yes.
Right?
So true. It's the same as us. We started one direction and here we are 2 years later
But you stay
with a
true to
completely
your core
different
mission.
Yes.
And that's 100%
That's
true.
what I think.
That's what it is.
We start every brainstorming session with, why did we start this?
Exactly.
And then what is
Exactly.
what do we have to do to adapt? But I think you stay true to what you've always wanted. But how are you getting it out?
Absolutely. It has always been from the very moment is how do we increase access to genetic testing for people? That's the question, right? And we've stayed true to that since the very, very beginning. But the how has changed 700,000 times. And it's simply because when you observe the problem, you observe one tiny little facet of the problem.
Or you observe it in one context.
In one context, right?
Yes, the
And
perspective
so
of
our entire job, literally, for the bulk of our existence has been learning, researching, talking to people, testing our hypotheses. And only because of that evolution have we really been able to arrive at a solution that works. It wasn't because we just had this brilliant idea and we tried it and launched it and it worked. That's not how it worked at all. It was a constant asking of questions and testing our beliefs in order to arrive at this solution.
I think what's really interesting about you saying that is that while all of us are doing something wildly different, that is at the core, I think, of almost anyone on an entrepreneurial journey.
Yes.
You know, like that's exactly it, is that it's like all of the iterations, all of like realizing that there's actually, as you start to get into it, there's so many other elements to it.
Yep.
Yes.
The problem is probably
Is a lot bigger than, I mean, I think we discover that all the time. Like what we start, we think we're like, oh my God, there's all these other things. And so we continue to almost add more and more value because we know there's more and more things.
And I want to ask a question though, because I think can it get too much to where then you also want to help every freaking person that you meet and realize? Can we talk briefly? Because then it's like, how do you say, all right? Because then you'd be like, well, then I can give 20 million of these away.
I think it goes back to your mission and your why. Exactly. And that's, one of the things I always ask myself and say is I remind myself I'm doing it for the greater good. Yeah. So while I want to help every individual, I try to make sure that we're investing our time and resources. I'm investing my time and resources as much as possible in the thing that is going to drive the most impact, move the needle the farthest. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And monetizing when you're putting out strategies to monetize the solution that you have. I think it always comes back because when you're so motivated by mission and impact, sometimes, I think at one point you as well as me toyed with the idea of, do we go philanthropic? Should this even be a for-profit? This is just so impactful to change the world. Do we charge for this? And I think, at the end of the day, whether you decide to go for-profit, nonprofit, everything you do and everything you put out there, it has to be to drive the mission forward, because the mission going forward creates the greater good.
Right.
Yes, and I think then the revenue will come from that, depending on whatever your revenue stream plan or whatever that is will then come with it.
And I think we uncovered that our gateway to maximum impact was through you guys, through our thought leaders.
Yeah.
The more we could pour into and invest in the thought leaders so that they could develop their platform, they could develop what their missions were, that was how we were getting our messaging across and how we were really having more impact.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to hit the subscriber base kind of thing. Like, you guys are our gateway into that.
I think it's important, and as we wrap up this conversation, I think what I would want any listener out there to hopefully take away from this is, if you have a solution you want to bring to the community, you don't have to wait for it to be perfect to get started, and give yourself that grace period to learn, to iterate, to evolve, and really through doing and testing and measuring is how you're going to eventually get to that perfect solution. And so I thank you guys for being here on the call. Listen to me. I think I'm on a Zoom call, and meanwhile I'm on a podcast. No, but thank you guys so much for being here today. I value so much your perspectives as community leaders and entrepreneurs, and being on the same journey that we're on. Our next episode, we're going to talk about how to take these ideas, these solutions, these products, and actually sell them.
We're still figuring that part.
Yes.
So be sure to tune in. Episode 3. You got your idea. Now what?
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Her Pursuit. You can catch a new episode every other Wednesday. Please don't forget to subscribe or follow so that you don't miss out on any of the good stuff.
We love bringing you free content and value to help inspire and motivate you. So if you enjoyed this episode, throw us a thumbs up, leave us a rating, a review, and send this to a friend who you think would enjoy it. Your support is so important to us, and we wouldn't be able to do any of this without you. So thanks for listening. Talk to you in 2 weeks.